Committee will now reconvene, and pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on February 25th, the committee will begin its study on family reunification. And today we have as witnesses the Honourable John McCallum, PCMP, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, Robert Orr, the Deputy Minister, Operations, David Kashabak, Acting Director General, Immigration Branch, Paul Armstrong, Director General, Centralized Network. I'd like to welcome the witnesses to our committee, and I especially would like to welcome back the Minister. We're looking forward to hearing from you. 7 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and it's good to be back. I think I've been here a few times. Always a pleasure. With my officials, I'm very happy to be here. So I will make a few comments about the theme of your upcoming study on family unification, and then after that I'd be very happy to answer any questions you might have. So I would like to give you a summary of the broad outlines of the program and also recent developments and changes which we are planning to make, and then I'd be happy to take your questions. Les immigrants parrainés par des membres de leur famille.
Immigrants sponsored by family members make up but one of three broad categories of immigrants within our system. The other two being economic immigrants and refugees. Although economic immigration programs are responsible for the majority of newcomers who are welcomed to this country, the long-standing goal of reuniting families has been an important part of the history of Canada's immigration system, and it remains fundamental to that system.
This can include spouses, partners, children, parents or grandparents of the sponsor, and in some limited cases, other family members. And Mr. Chair, from the mandate letter I received from the Prime Minister and through subsequent announcements and actions, I think it's clear that we are placing a strong emphasis on family reunification. I think it might be said that especially our commitment on a quicker processing time for immediate families, nuclear families, arguably our most important. It's a question of judgment, certainly one of the very most important campaign commitments we made, and one on which we are very serious. It's true, of course, that the refugee initiative got the lion's share of the media attention, and it is very important, but I think if you go to the fundamentals of our system, the processing times for a family class are also really important. And I would also say that if you ask why we are welcoming to families, it's not just because we're nice people. It's not just because we think it's right that people should be reunited with their immediate families and should be able to bring their parents here because we're humanitarian, kind people. Hopefully we are. But there's also a very economically important dimension to this. We are competing for strong immigrants with other countries around the world, with Australia, with UK, with United States. And if we have really strong immigrants we want to bring in and we say, oh yeah, you come in but you can't bring your family, or it'll take you 2 years to bring your family, well, they may well go somewhere else. So I think it's not just humanitarian gesture, it's also economic sense. In order to attract the so-called best and the brightest, you're not going to attract them very well if you don't also allow them to bring their families in without substantial delay. And the other thing I would mention is that I perhaps have said this here before, but it's relevant for family class considerations that I don't particularly like the term economic immigrant because it almost has the implication that the others are non-economic or of little economic value, and that is not true. That the spouses, the family class spouses generally do as well in the labor market as the spouses of economic immigrants. The parents and grandparents, a significant fraction, are in the labor force. Even those who are not in the labor force among parents and grandparents facilitate the work of the mother and father by helping to look after the children. So I think it's a question of degree. I think all immigrants make both economic and non-economic contributions, and that we want to give priority to family class, not just to benefit immigrants, to allow them to bring families, but also because it promotes a more successful immigration program for the country as a whole, for economic reasons as well as other reasons. And so to that end, we have admitted more family class immigrants in 2016 than normal. We have 80,000 admissions in family class, including about 60,000 partners and children and 20,000 parents and grandparents. And how are we going to bring down processing times for families? Basically, three ways. We're admitting more. If you admit more, you run down the inventory more, and that helps to reduce the processing times. We put some more money into the system, $25 million, to support family class immigrants. And thirdly, we're trying to become more efficient. And this is partly through learning from our experience with the Syrian refugees. As you all know, we did it quickly, but I think we did it well in terms of health and security. And so how did we do it quickly and well there? Well, we're learning from how we did it there to try to import some of those techniques into how we process family class and other categories of immigrants. For example, we did things concurrently, all at the same time, instead of consecutively, and that speeds things up. If you do A and then you don't start B till you complete A, and you don't start C until you complete B, it takes a lot longer than if you do A, B, and C kind of all at the same time. And so the department has set up what they call Tiger teams, which is groups of successful, not senior level, middle level, shall we say, people who have worked in the system firsthand and can bring new ideas and new suggestions as to how to improve the process. So there's three ingredients to bringing the processing times down. One is higher levels, which I just mentioned. A second is more money, and a third is more efficiency. So it's through a combination of those things that we are reducing the inventory, the backlog of spouses, and I am hoping to be able to announce before the end of this year a substantial reduction in the processing times for spouses. But we cannot make the announcement until we do the work to clear out the inventory, and so that's why such an announcement is not immediate. So as you know, with parents and grandparents, we increased the number who could apply each year from 5,000 to 10,000, and we estimate that the inventory will be down to 46,000 by the end of 2016 from a peak of more than 165,000 in 2011. So those are big numbers, and that's going to make a big difference in how long it takes to admit the typical parent and grandparent, from 165,000 inventory in 2011 down to 46,000 by end of 2016, and it's getting smaller, so those processing times will be coming down. So I will not say much more because I want to answer your questions, but let me just conclude by listing three other things we're in the process of doing. we're going to, as we committed in the election, going to give more points under express entry for siblings of Canadians. This is an idea I learned about in Vancouver. I think it's a good idea. We're also going to reduce the maximum age for dependent children to under 22 from under 19. And we're going to eliminate the conditional permanent residence measure for spouses and make them permanent residents on entry. Those last two are on their way. They require a regulatory process, so they're on their way to being gazetted, I think is the term, for consultation with Canadians fairly soon. But that regulatory process takes some time, even if it's something as simple as changing the age from 19 to 22. But what I can say is it's on the way to a process of consultation with Canadians in the not-too-distant future. Donc, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Et
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I will be happy to take your questions.
We'll now move to the 7-minute rounds of questioning to the Minister. Ms. Zaid, and I understand you'll be splitting your time with Mr. Tabar. Ms. Zaid.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will be splitting my time with Mr. Tabara. Thank you, Minister, and thanks a lot for all the work which you are doing on this important file. And this topic which we are starting is really very important, I think, to all of us. And for me, it is really very important. The riding which I represent, family reunification, is a very big issue. 90% of the casework in my office is related to immigration. So, Minister, when you were here before our committee on June 9th to discuss the 2016 levels and the supplementary estimates, you discussed an adjustment to operating expenditure of $20.9 million to hire 191 full-time equivalents to support, among other activities, reducing existing family class inventories, increasing family class intake, and streamlining processing. Have those people been hired, and what impact they have made on the backlog?
well, I'll turn it over to Robert Orr for that specific question, but I would say we've made a substantial reduction, some 21% in the backlog. But as to whether those people have been hired, I'm not sure.
Mr. President, a large number of those people have been hired. We have certainly been using the money very effectively. It is largely split between our international region and our centralized network. But I think we're seeing a reflection of that. As the Minister said, the inventory has come down significantly. We've also seen a reduction in processing times for spouses, partners, and children. It's gone from 26 months to 22 months for those in Canada and 18 to 16 months for those overseas. So we're already starting to see a direct impact of the funds which are being used.
Thank you. Minister, I represent a large Filipino community in my riding of Scarborough Centre, and I think as does Mr. Sarai in Surrey. And we have both heard from our constituents that caregivers face particularly long wait times for family reunification processing. So what is being done in that regard?
Okay. I was recently in the Philippines, talked about that issue. I've met with caregivers. I think they do an extremely valuable service, including, as I think I've said here before, to my mother, who's 92 years old and has a great Filipino caregiver. But I acknowledge that there are problems here, that there are challenges here, and that the processing time is too long. And that processing time is coming down. It will continue to come down, but it is still too high. And the general process for fixing it is the same as what I said for nuclear families. It's a combination of higher levels, more money, and more efficiency. It's really the same across the board, and there is some limited progress there. But we don't have all the money in the world. We have to choose priorities, and my top priority was the nuclear family, the immediate spouses and the immediate dependents. But we're also working to try to improve the situation for caregivers.
Thank you, Minister. Over to Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Zaid, 3.5 minutes. Mr. Tabera, sorry. 3.5
Thank you.
minutes.
The average processing time for family class has started to increase in 2005. In 2012, the overall processing time for parents and grandparents was 58 months, so almost 5 years. Could you elaborate on what changes in legislation, for example, on regulations, have led to this outcome?
Well, you mean over since 2005?
Yes.
I believe that the main reason, it was certainly the case, I remember documenting this when we were in opposition, that the processing times from 2005 to 2014 or so for family class were up quite dramatically. And I think a part of it was that they were starved for funds and starved for level space. I told you there were three things: money, level space, and efficiency. And if you starve them for levels and you starve them for money, your processing times will go up. So I don't have a precise analysis of that, but I remember from the opposition days certainly documenting the upward trend in processing times, and there were budgetary reductions in certain years, and I think those were the main reason. I think your committee could look into that in more detail in your study, but that would be my impression.
Thank you. Minister, you came to my region, in the Waterloo region, before, and you met with a lot of individuals there, and it's the high-tech sector of Canada, and one of their biggest issues was, and I know you don't like to use the term economic immigrants, but they're looking to get...
I don't mind. Everybody else does.
But they're looking to get the best and brightest in the high-tech sector to come into our region. And some of the main issues they're having is immigration. It's taking it's taking a very long time for these highly skilled workers to come to our region, to immigrate here.
Well, look, I agree with that, and I've spoken to high-tech people in various parts of the country, including your region, but also in Toronto, also in Burnaby, Vancouver, Ottawa, and they basically all say the same thing. If we say the processing time is 6 months, they say that's no good, it has to be 6 days. So they're always in a rush, and they are in very globally competitive industries, and so we think we will try to do a better job for people in those industries, because we think they have a lot to offer, and these are very high-growth industries which, as you know, in your region are important, but they're important in various parts of the country. So in general, what we are trying to do is to make Canada a better destination for the so-called best and the brightest. Some people object to that term because we also need lower-skilled people, but we certainly want to be competitive with those other competitor countries I mentioned, and that's why we're going to introduce more points under express entry for students. I think everywhere I go, nobody disagrees when I say that of all the people who might become new Canadians, international students are probably the #1 choice.
Thank you.
They're young, etc. And so we're, just to be quickly finishing then, we're doing various things to make it easier for the so-called best and the brightest to come to Canada, both through temporary workers and through permanent residents.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Rempel, and I believe that you're splitting your time with Mr. Soroya.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. 7 minutes.
Minister, you mentioned the need to look at different classes of reunification from different cohorts of people that are in Canada, and you mentioned refugees being part of that. I've had a woman from the Blue Sea region of Quebec call my office about 3 times a week. She's a Haitian woman, and she's come to Canada. She has relatives in Haiti who she's been trying to sponsor to Canada. Obviously, their situation has been exacerbated by the devastating earthquake that happened in 2010. She's expressed frustration to us that she feels that other cohorts of people outside of the Syrian refugee community are being neglected in being sponsored to Canada or reunified with their families. I'm not quite sure what to tell her. And she phones me 3 times a week, every week. And I'd just like to send her a clip of your response, and I'd like to give her the opportunity basically to ask you a question directly. What are you doing for the Haitian community in terms of reunifying them and giving them opportunities to come to Canada?
It's funny you should mention that community, because, obviously this is not a Liberal planted question, but it could have been, because that is a community that we have done.
Standing up for constituents in a nonpartisan way. That's
I know,
crazy.
but all right.
Don't do that, Johnny.
What I'm trying to say is that this is a community we've really reached out to in order to help. And so I'm saying maybe one of these people might have asked me that, because we made a huge effort. There were Haitians admitted into Canada because of the earthquake back in 2010, and the number of them were undocumented. And we went out of our way to reach out to that community to encourage them to come forward. And my colleague, the member from Bourassa, who's Haitian, and I had a press conference in the Haitian part of Montreal, along with the Quebec immigration minister, and we spoke to Haitian radio stations. Our friend went to Haitian churches to really appeal to the people to come forward. We had a simplified form. We even had a special loan that they could take, because we wanted them to come forward so that they could become regularized as Canadians. Now, I'll be honest with you, not as many came forward as we were hoping, notwithstanding these appeals. And so I don't know whether it was because we didn't reach them all, or we didn't know exactly how many there were, because if they're undocumented, we don't know for sure the exact number. But all I can say to you is that we did everything conceivable that we could conceive to try to appeal to these people to come forward so that we could welcome them as permanent residents, given that they had come here under the special circumstances of the earthquake.
I think the issue that she's raising is there's additional people who want to come to Canada who are part of her family, and that she's feeling as though other cohorts outside of the Syrian community, and I'm by no means trying to belittle the urgency of the Syrian crisis, but there's a perception that the reunification efforts aren't equitable at this point. So, as I turn the microphone over to my colleague, I will be referring her file to your office.
Okay, we'll do.
And certainly, I think that it's I understand that there's only certain priorities that can be priorities, but we also have to show a sense of equity in terms of managing humanitarian needs, and that's something that I would stand up on her behalf. And with that, I'll send it over to Mr. Soraya.
Mr. Soraya, 3 minutes.
I totally agree with that. And
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
sorry.
Minister, I see Mr. McCallum more than my family between here and between Markham. So we were together in Markham as well. The one of the biggest calls I get is from the students. You mentioned something earlier, if you can finish it off. The number of students calling us every day, they were here for the last 3 years, 4 years, 2 years. They have done their degrees. They're ready to work. They are having a rough time getting into the workforce. Is there any plan for the students which we can refer them to your office, or what is the future plan for these kids? Do they need to go back, or there is something can be done for them here?
Okay. We have the postgraduate employment that they are allowed to do for a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the main thing that we as the government are going to do that's new is to have more points for students under express entry. So I'm not saying it was on purpose, but I think they were a little bit shortchanged by the previous system, because if you have to get a labor market impact assessment and you're an entry-level job, then it's difficult. So if they have more points, a higher fraction of the international students will be accepted as permanent residents. Now, some of them may have problems not being able to stay beyond a certain time, maybe because of this 4-year rule, and that is a different issue, but it's related, and we're looking at that now that we've received the parliamentary report. But the main thing that we as a government are doing is to give more points to admit more permanent residents, more students as permanent residents.
Going back to the student one more time,
That's okay. I was just giving you a comment.
going back to the thing, the restaurant industry, the service industry, the agriculture industry, the fruit packer, they are looking for labor. And these people, they speak the language, they understand the system, they're eager to work. If something can be done, it is an immediate success for the employers as well as for the students.
20 seconds, please.
Well, I mean, they're allowed to work, but they have to get a job. You mean you say they have trouble finding a job? Is that the problem?
The jobs are available. They're not allowed to work. If they qualified as accountant, he cannot work in the restaurant. So the restaurant guys are looking for, they'd love to hire the person, but he can't work there because it's not the job in his trade.
A quick response, please, Mr.
We can
O'Rourke.
follow up on that, but essentially, yes, we are hoping that those who graduate in a certain area will be working in the area in which they have studied. And so, but there are opportunities for students to work and to join the labor market after they've completed their studies.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. Ms. Kwong, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank the Minister and his staff for coming before the committee. First, I'd like to ask the Minister, why is the Ministry continuing to revoke at this time up to some 60 cases of individuals each month where they have found to have misrepresented their citizenship application? The Minister acknowledged publicly that there isn't procedural fairness for processing these cases because they don't have that under Bill C-24 and it's not yet been fixed under Bill C-6. And so an individual or family could be impacted even for a child who may have no fault of their own to have been in a situation caught up with them where there's misrepresentation. So will the Minister agree that a moratorium should be put in place with respect to revoking citizenship applications based on misrepresentation until such time that the process has been addressed?
Just coincidence, I was asked exactly this same question in Senate question period about half an hour ago, and I said we would look into it. But the basic point I made is that I think that citizens should be revoked for people who misrepresent the situation, but I also think that the people should have a right to a proper appeal. Now, right now, the system is such there's a review or some appeal, and I think it was you who put forward an amendment to Bill C-6, correct me if I'm wrong, to strengthen that appeal process, but it was declared out of scope. And Senator Ahmedvar in the Senate is now proposing an amendment to strengthen the appeal right, and I've said I'm open to that. I like that idea. We don't know yet if the Senate will rule that to be in scope or out of scope. In the House, they said it was out of scope. The Senate rules are different, so I don't know. But I would certainly welcome that if she makes that amendment and if the Senate accepts it and it's in scope. But I don't think we're going to have, I said I'd look at it, but I don't think we'd have a moratorium. I think we have a system that could be improved, as I've just acknowledged, but which has been going for some years. And I'm hopeful that we will have an amendment of that kind accepted in the bill.
Thank you for that, Minister, and I appreciate that. I guess my point is this, right, that the process is broken, is unfair. I'm not saying that people should not have their citizenship revoked, but they should have the opportunity to go before, to have an independent hearing, present their case, and have compassionate humanitarian reasons be considered, and then a decision be made with an independent person. That's all I'm asking. So in the meantime, until this gets fixed, I think those people without due process should be afforded due process. That's the reason why I'm asking for a moratorium. I'll park that with the Minister, and I hope he will consider that, because I think that would be a welcome move by many people. On the second question I'd like to ask the Minister is this. The Immigration and Refugee Protection Act specifies that refugees can make application under the one-year window of opportunity for sponsoring families or bringing families over to Canada. In addition to that, through this experience, many refugees come forward to say the traditional definition of a family is different from what we understand it to be. So I wonder whether or not there's any consideration to revising that family unit for refugees. And then also, there is a previous law from the Conservative government around cessation. And so that is that if you travel back as a refugee to your country of origin, you could actually have your status revoked as well. And that has huge implications, and that is ongoing at the moment. And that too has not yet been fixed on the cessation laws. And I wonder, with the Syrian refugees, over 25,000 now have arrived, have we told them that if they travel for whatever reason back to their country of origin, they could lose their status? Because if we haven't, they could, in fact, that could actually happen to them, and is not right, and that's not what we want to do. So again, I wonder whether or not there's any plans from the government to deal with the cessation issue.
Okay, we're doing an overhaul. I'd refer the question in a moment to Mr. Orr about the definition of family, but on cessation, we are in the process now of doing a review or an overview or some reforms to our asylum system, like the designated country of origin issue, 2 tiers of country, and cessation comes into this, and this is a bill that will be received by this committee. So I think your point about cessation could be covered in that bill, but it hasn't been completed yet, but it could be a part of that. And the one-year window, I think it's the traditional definition of family, the same for family class, or is it broader?
No, it's the same.
It's the same. Now, I know one can always make the case for broader. One can always make the case for broader. It's difficult to do that because then the numbers become so very large. So we went partially in that direction when we gave more points for people under express entry if they have siblings in Canada, on the grounds that that would help them to settle in faster if you have family here. But to broaden the definition of family to include, I don't know how far you want to go, cousins, the problem is it would become so large.
Thank you. On the cessation, I actually have tabled a private member's bill. It's a simple fix, actually, 2 clauses. I would urge the minister to enact on that. It will make a big difference, I think, as well.
Well, we will look at it.
On a related issue,
30 seconds.
Caregivers, disabled children, often they're actually rejected, even though they have met their 2 years. And because they have some sort of disability, and then they're rejected. I wonder whether or not the minister can comment on that, and whether or not there will be action to address this issue.
Can you tell us the rules on that?
That may be the case, but I think more broadly that the department signaled that it would be undertaking a fundamental review of the excessive demand requirements of the Act, and so that is underway at the moment, and that may address some of these situations.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, we do have a meeting in this month. I have a meeting with all the provincial and territorial immigration ministers. The money for health is their money, and we are discussing that issue with my fellow ministers.
Thank you, Mr. McCallum. Yes.
Mr. Chair, the proceedings of an in-camera meeting are deemed to be confidential, and certainly the bill review component of Bill C6 was conducted in camera. The minister has just divulged the proceedings of an in-camera meeting. I don't believe the minister was in attendance for that meeting, so there seems to be a breach of information and confidentiality that is now on a televised meeting. So I do raise a point of privilege in the breach of confidentiality on an in-camera meeting.
What did I do? Uh-oh.
He also divulged your ruling on that as well, I believe. So that's an additional component. So not only was it the breach of privilege on an amendment that was put on a televised meeting, but also your ruling.
Ms. Rempel, thank you for pointing this out. It is a very serious matter that you raise. I will be reviewing the blues very carefully to make sure of the details of the matter that you have raised. And I will, at that point, come back to the committee once I've had that opportunity. Thank you. And we'll now continue. Mr. Asasi, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, Minister. It's always very helpful when you do appear before the committee. Of course, today we're talking about family sponsorships, and there's no doubt that it does actually enhance the sense of belonging of newcomers who come here when they have the opportunity to bring relatives here. Now, in your opening remarks, you referred to the fact that sponsored spouses, insofar as the issue of incomes and earnings are concerned, they do as well as other groups. Does the department actually have studies that bear this out? How do we know this?
Go ahead. We do it about two ways. One way is actually we're able to link our administrative immigration data with tax filing information. So it gives us a nice longitudinal picture of outcomes, mainly economic, but also incidence of employment among all of these different categories, which allows us to compare then, sort of family class immigrants versus other classes of immigrants.
Okay. No, that's great. I'm just very happy to hear this because others are of the view that on occasion families who are sponsored to come here are a burden on our system. The other question I had is, as you know, in 2011, the government introduced the idea of super visas. I'm just wondering what your personal view of super visas is and whether we will be continuing with super visas.
I think super visas are good. There's a sort of myth out there that liberals don't like super visas. That's never been my view. I think we have two options for parents and grandparents. We have either they can become permanent residents as a parent or grandparent, or they can use a super visa, which gives them a lot of flexibility in spending extended periods of time in Canada. Or they can just have a regular visa. But to some extent, the super visa and the permanent residence are alternatives or substitutes, or they may do one on the way to getting the other. So, and also given that not every parent and grandparent will succeed in becoming a permanent resident because the spaces are limited, then the super visa is a safety valve or an alternative, and some may even prefer it. Or some may choose to do it because the other isn't available. So I do think it broadens the range of choice. We want to have both, and to the extent possible, we want both to be available. But I do think both are useful.
Thank you. And then just out of curiosity, I was wondering whether the department has records as to the uptake for super visas, or whether they actually retain information that will tell us what the source countries are for super visa users?
I'm sure they do.
Since December 2011, over 70,000 super visas have been issued. The approval rate is at about 80% on those applications. And a number of course, have gone for extensions as well. The main countries of application are India and Chinese are the highest users of the super visa, followed by the Philippines, Pakistan, and Bangladesh.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now, since you have actually explained your thoughts on various issues that are before this committee, you did note that in your opening remarks that, of course, our immigration system has to compete with the Australian, the British, the American system. Are there any aspects of those systems that you find preferable to ours, and what would those things be in terms of?
Website.
Website? Absolutely.
Their website's better than our website.
Okay. All
Maybe
of them?
that's not a very scientific statement, but certainly I think the department has done some focus testing and my staff compared, and it seems that Australia and New Zealand, their websites are easier to navigate. And I mean, one of the things we have to do, I'm not really blaming my department, but you asked me, and I think those countries do have better websites, is improve our level of service on the website, because in many ways the website is the future. It's not the whole future, but it's a big part of it, and we are in competition with those countries. So we want to do just as well as them or better in every dimension that's important, and one of those is website. Another is processing time. Sometimes it's difficult to compare. Sometimes you're comparing apples with oranges. So most of the things that we do are not purely guided by comparing with other countries, but it's often useful to benchmark. And so, we're wanting to get quicker servicing, more welcoming servicing, better website, all of those things we are aiming to achieve.
Thank you for that. My last question. Previously, we did have a category for fiancés, but it was eliminated a few years back. I was wondering whether the department is currently considering the possibility of bringing that category back.
To be honest, I didn't even know about that. Perhaps Mr. Orr could comment.
Yes, it is going back some years that we did have a fiancé category. I think it was subject to considerable abuse, and that was one of the reasons that we moved away from it. There's also a matter of just in terms of choices of within the level space that we have. If we open up more categories, that means something else has to probably give. And so there are a number of issues around that. So no, there is no consideration of opening that category again at present.
Thank you. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Asasi. Mr. Tilson, 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Minister, my first question is, have you consulted with other levels of government, particularly the provincial levels of government, with respect to the impact that increased social assistance usage and other service delivery that the provincial governments and I suppose municipal governments will inevitably have on those governments as well as on taxpayers, and as a result of the higher family reunification intake?
Well, certainly in the context of the refugees, the answer to that question is yes, because we're soon to, in a little while, we will have what they call month 13, that the refugees receive income support from the federal government for 12 months, and after that, they don't. So either they have a job or else they would have to take social assistance. So we are having a federal provincial meeting later this month, and officials in my department are talking to provincial officials. Now, month 13 is nothing new. We've had refugees, government-assisted refugees, for many, many years. But this latest cohort is bigger than most, and so it is a matter under active discussion. But I guess the point I would make is it's normal for a significant number of government-assisted refugees to need income support beyond 1 year. When you think of what they've come from, when you think of the fact that they often speak not a word of English or French, they often have not much education, it takes a while to become integrated into Canadian life.
Mr. Minister, I understand, we went through that with the Syrian study, we got into that. This question is specifically with respect to the family reunification issue, because once they become permanent residents, I mean, they're on the sponsors, as I understand it, and you can correct me, the sponsors are on the hook for a period of time, but once they become permanent residents, there's a cost. And so that's the issue that I've asked for. Could be social assistance. It could be other types of issues that the municipal and particularly the provincial governments have. So my question isn't with respect to refugees. My question is with respect to the family reunification, which is what this meeting's all about.
My apologies. I misunderstood your question. Under our system, if your spouse comes to Canada, you have a personal responsibility to support that person for 3 years. And if a parent or grandparent comes, you have a personal responsibility for 20 years. So that means for at least the first 3 years in the case of a spouse, the first 20 years in the case of a parent or grandparent, the individual will not receive social assistance, or is not supposed to, because the sponsor has the obligation to provide that support.
Well, we'll have municipalities and provinces come to the meeting on this issue, and they'll tell us, but it seems to me, if you're agreeing that you're going to increase the family reunification numbers, that will happen. And so I guess then the next question is, does the government, or indeed your ministry, are you prepared to increase the transfers to offset the costs that are borne by other levels of government brought on by this policy change of increasing the number of family reunification?
Well, perhaps you didn't hear my answer.
I heard your answer, and
for the first 3 years,
I understand that,
they don't have any costs.
And then what happens after 3 years?
Well, then I guess they're like other Canadians. I don't know if they're abnormally high or low. Perhaps Mr. Orr has an answer.
Mr. Cashback may be able to help out with specifics, but in general, the outcomes for spouses who come to Canada are quite good. The economic outcomes, and so I think that the number who would be on social assistance would be relatively small.
Mr. Chairman, I still have.
Thank you. There's only 2 seconds.
2 seconds. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Mr. Sarai, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Minister, for coming. And this maybe sound more of a statement than a question, but I think Canada's foundation is built on family reunification, and it's kind of been the cornerstone of our immigration policy, which was a nation-building immigration policy. The true nation-building immigration is done when immigrants put roots in our country. They bring their families and make their make Canada their homes. And that has shown that it alleviates the desire to move back, it alleviates loneliness, and it gives a lot of family structure. So if I can say, I can only stress that if we can do this more and larger scales, I think even my experience in dealing with economic immigrants as well, that those that aren't able to get their families here faster feel a sense of loneliness, a high desire to go back. They don't really contemplate the high cost of childcare and raising families here. They face a lot of difficulties in starting a family, for that matter. So the faster, the more efficient, and more fair we can make it, the better. My question now is in terms of a policy that I believe the U.S. has. We have a smaller policy of that, which is called the last remaining relative. But I think if there's a possibility to broaden that, where sometimes you have 4 or 5 siblings, their whole entire family's here, the parents are here, but there's a sister or a brother left behind, so the entire family is here. Is there a possibility that under family reunification we can look at that? It may not have to have the same speed of processing time, but help unite families that are separated by one last sibling only?
Okay, that's an interesting question. It's a little bit along the lines of the other question about broadening the definition of family for the 1-year window. Yours is more limited. Did you say we used to have that?
No, we have a policy of last remaining relatives, but that's if you have no parents living in Canada or abroad, then you can pick one person and bring them if you have a relative. But this would be, even if you had a family members, you have parents here or abroad, that you can bring the last remaining relative left behind if the entire extended family otherwise is here.
Okay, but did you say we once had that program?
No, I believe the U.S. has something
Okay.
similar, but we don't have that I am aware of.
Well, maybe Mr. Orr has a comment on that. I'm not sure how many people that would involve.
Well, I think something like that, we would have to look at it fairly carefully. Again, it's a matter of choices, and it's a matter of, I think, in terms of the level space as well. If we do that, what numbers are we going to be dealing with? And it would be probably quite a complicated program to deal with. And what choices one would have to make in terms of level space and funding and so on. So there are issues there. At the moment, though, I think it's important to keep in mind, too, that there are the humanitarian compassionate grounds and that possibility does exist, done on a case-by-case approach. And there are about 8,000 cases a year which are dealt with through the humanitarian and compassionate grounds. So if there are special circumstances, we do have mechanisms to deal with those sorts of cases.
Thank you. My second part is about spousal sponsorship debt. If a Canadian woman who enters a relationship, her spouse comes here, is abused and separates, currently she's still on the hook for 3 years to pay for any social assistance that her spouse might incur or carry here. Is there anything we can do to work with the provinces? I understand there's some memorandum being undertaken, but in order to alleviate those, specifically women who suffer from domestic abuse that are not burdened by a legal system that forces them to pay any debt incurred by their sponsored spouses.
Okay, I think Mr. Orr wants to comment, but I want to make one other comment related to that. One of the things we are doing to deal better with domestic abuse is this 3-year provisional temporary residence for spouses, because the problem there, as we heard in spades from various third-party groups, is that if a woman is subject to domestic abuse but only has provisional temporary residence, she'll put up with that abuse, because if she leaves the husband, if she's a foreigner, she has no status and might be deported. So we're dealing with that part. But your question is related to my answer. On the other side, you're sort of on two sides. He wants to protect the taxpayer, and you want to protect the woman who has to pay for the income of her abusive husband. So, Mr. Orr, you can be
actually, we're over time at this point. Perhaps Mr. Tilson, next 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. You have shown that in comparison to the numbers contained in the 2015 Immigration Levels Plan that your government is increasing the family reunification at the expense of the economic class. Migrants with the numbers published in the 2016 Immigration Levels Plan. Can you tell us what your rationale is for this?
Well, 2016 was a special year in that we had the commitment on the 25,000 refugees, so that meant the refugee number tripled or quadrupled between 2015 and 2016. And we also had a commitment to bring down the processing time for spouses, which meant that we wanted to increase that number. And since the total number was limited, the economic immigrants got cut slightly. But I'm telling you that going forward, I think in some sense that was a special year. And I can't really say what the levels will be now, I don't know. But going forward, we would expect in normal times that the economic numbers would certainly rise.
An internal departmental study published in 2014 concluded that the economic outcomes of parents and grandparents were below the average of all immigrants, with fewer than half reporting employment income, low average earnings, and increased EI usage over time. In other words, there was a net drain on the economy. What's your comment on that?
Well, I'll turn to Mr. Kashabak, but I would also say that, as I said in the beginning, parents and grandparents also provide non-monetary services that wouldn't be measured, like they look after kids, facilitate the work of mother and father. But perhaps you could respond to the numbers that he mentioned.
Well, I think the real question is, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Minister, is taking this finding into an account. When your government decided to double the number of applications for parents and grandparents in this year's immigration plan, were you considering this? Because it did happen. I understand what you're saying. You increased the Syrian refugee issues by 25,000, but the economic people have been prejudiced.
Do you want to comment on his statistics?
I can. I mean, I think some of the things that were introduced or modified in 2013 were really to make that period of responsibility longer. The move to the 20-year sponsorship undertaking period. We adjusted the threshold the income threshold to sponsor to what's called minimum necessary income plus 30%, just to make sure that there isn't that sense of a draw on the family income, and requiring sponsors to provide three-year evidence of income stability in order to ensure that there is the financial stability on the family unit who's sponsoring, in response to some of those concerns.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the 2016 annual report to Parliament for your department indicates the plan to eliminate the $1,000 labor market impact assessment fee for those applying to bring in a caregiver. Why has this been done?
We'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay. That's an undertaking, Madam Clerk.
We will get back to you on that.
Of course you will. You always do, Mr. Minister.
Thank you.
Has your department done a comprehensive analysis on the impact that the shift away from the economic class migrants will have on Canada's economy?
10 seconds, please.
There is not a shift away from the economic class. This
Well, of course
is a one-year, very minor change. The level of economic immigrants in 2016 was much higher than the average of the previous number of years. So I don't really accept the premise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jarovich, 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, Minister, very much appreciate you being here today. One of the key issues in my riding is the change in the difficulty of the language test to become a permanent resident. My understanding is that in 2011, it moved from level 3 to level 5. Many in my riding come to Canada on a work permit. They then apply for a permanent residency, but they're rejected outright if they cannot pass a level 5 English or French. Now, previously, my understanding was that there's a possibility of a substitute evaluation, so where the whole picture was looked at. So they looked at the economic viability, the family roots, their contribution to Canada, various other factors, and if they didn't have quite the level of language, that was allowed to pass. There's a strong belief by many who come from non-English and French-speaking countries, so many of them are sort of Southern European in my riding. They feel very much discriminated against. And I know that some people would say, well, we want higher levels of English in Canada. And then usually the response when I say this to those in my community who complained, they'll say, well, our skills our levels good enough to get a work permit, but it's obviously not good enough to get a permanent residency. So my question to you, is there any consideration to moving it back from level 5 to level 3? Thank you.
Well, not right now. There isn't, but we could look at it. But I just want to say a couple of things. We have become a little more lenient than the previous government in Bill C-6 when we said the language test would not apply to those 55 to 64, whereas previously it did, on the grounds that while language is really important, older people don't always come to the country with perfect English, but their children and certainly their grandchildren do have perfect English. And so we were a little more on the liberal side, shall we say, the smaller liberal side on the language issue on that. But I have to acknowledge that there's a whole lot of evidence suggesting that skill in English or French is a critical determinant of economic success in Canada. And so we haven't really changed too much of what the Conservatives did on language and what previous Liberal governments may have done. So we've changed a little bit, but we kind of accept the premise that success and competence in language is an important criterion of success. And, you know, we don't apply that to spouses, but when we're talking about economic immigrants, whom we expect to make a contribution to the economy, we have to take into account of the factors that we think will make them successful, and language is one of them. And so I don't really see how it's discriminatory, except that, I mean, the same consideration applies to any group whose first language is not English.
I guess my follow-up question on that is, are there actually some sort of report as to the change in the impact that it might have had on those who actually ends up becoming permanent residents? So if before it used to be, I don't know, Italian, Spanish, Polish, and then it all of a sudden changed to, you know, Burmese, and I don't know, like a whole slew of other things. Has there been a study on that? Or do we have the numbers on the implication of that?
Actually, I don't know. Does anybody know?
Well, a partial answer to your question, perhaps, is that we do track very carefully, you know, the nationalities that are coming, that do apply and are successful coming to Canada. Yes, that changes over time, but it's a number of various factors which result in that. As you know, we apply a universal policy, and we're absolutely committed to that universal policy, so the same criteria applies to everyone.
Okay, thank you. And then my second...
15 seconds.
Well, then, thank you very much, Minister, for coming here today.
Thank you.
Ms. Kwan, 3 minutes.
Okay. The question around immigration levels. I know that the ministers embarked on a series of consultation, and we anticipate some changes with various categories in terms of changes for the applications. So would that come with changes with immigration levels as well, and more specifically an increase in immigration levels in order to enhance permanent residence applications, or the number of permanent residence applications?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. If we have more immigrants, then what?
No, if the minister is embarking on these consultations and you're going to relax the permanent residence applications point system process, let's say students, for example, that the minister talked about. So are you also going to then increase the numbers under the immigration levels to absorb those changes?
Conceivably. But what we are saying is we think that international students make an especially valuable contribution to Canada. And so if we give them more points under express entry, it would mean a higher percentage of all the express entry people that we accept would be international students. So even if the numbers stayed the same, a higher percentage would be students and some other group would be less. But if we also increase the numbers, then we could have more students and maybe the same number of other people. But I think the two things are conceptually different. If we more points for students means more students, whether...
Thank you, Minister. I guess we'll just wait for the numbers. Can I ask the question then on refugee applications? The Minister spoke about having a meeting with his provincial counterparts and territorial counterparts. I'm wondering whether or not in that discussion will the Minister raise the issue of the need to increase welfare rates, because the reality is that's deficient for both refugees and non-refugees alike. And in fact, I would invite the Minister to join a welfare food challenge coming up on October the 15th, whereby you will undertake for 1 week to be on the welfare rate for the food portion and see how difficult it is. I tried it last year and almost fainted. I'm not kidding, I almost did just fainted because of that. And so I wonder whether or not that will be a topic for the Minister and whether or not he will join the welfare food challenge this year.
Well, I'll consider that.
10 seconds, Minister.
It is very unlikely I will suggest to the provinces that they increase their welfare rates.
Well,
Much as it might be a good thing, it's none of my business, really. It is purely a matter of provincial decision-making and jurisdiction.
I'd like to thank the Minister for appearing before our committee today. It's always a pleasure to have you here, Minister. And I will now suspend for 2 minutes to allow the Minister and his staff to leave. Of course, the department officials will remain for the second hour of our committee hearing. I'll suspend for 2 minutes. Meeting will now resume, and Ms. Girovic, you have 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thanks very much to the department officials who for staying another hour. I have a few questions for you. The first is related to third parties that we use. I'll give a case. I have a wonderful Portuguese woman whose mother applied to come 5 years ago. Everything's gone perfectly with her application. Payment's been made, there's been no issues, has gone through the whole process. We're 5 years later, so they applied when she was 76, she's now 81. And we are told that it's a security check that is holding up her application right now, and it's done with a third party, and that no one can possibly know the timeline for it. And it may take up to another 5 years. So I'd like to understand, how are we holding our third parties to account, and do we not have some service standards with them?
I can't comment, obviously, on a particular case and what the circumstances are there. Security screening is normally done. It would start initially with officers of IRCC, but we work closely with CBSA on this, and a number of issues are under, and their partners, but it's with CBSA that we do that. There are some service standards for certain types of applications and so on. This certainly is outside the norm, and I don't know what the situation is on that particular one. That is definitely outside the norm.
Okay, so there's some service standards. Are those published anywhere? Like, I don't know whether to raise a red flag because it seems so ridiculous, or whether it is just within, like, I don't know when I should be sort of jumping up and down.
I don't know. On the case that you have identified there, it does suggest to me that you should be raising a red flag. That does not sound normal.
Okay. And in terms of service standards, it's not published anywhere. It's just something that's worked within the department.
That's correct.
Okay, so that actually leads to my second question. How does the department evaluate how well it is providing services to the public? So is there a series of metrics that is used around sort of whether it's customer satisfaction or wait times, or whether there is some training metrics, whether there's a consistent level of service that's provided across the board, across Canada? So I guess there's two types of metrics. One is, is there any way that the department's evaluating whether it's actually providing good service to Canadians? One, and two, whether or not there's some sort of evaluation on how well the services are being delivered by your department across Canada.
Okay, there are a number of points there that I would like to mention, I suppose. We take performance management extremely seriously, and we do have a number of metrics that we measure ourselves against. One of the most obvious would be the service standards that we do have for the various lines of business, and all the key lines of business have very definite service standards, which are published, and overwhelmingly we do meet those service standards. So that is one point. We also do things like client service surveys to have a better indication of what works and what is not working. When we get feedback from our call center, when we get feedback from our emails and so on that come in, we take all of that very seriously and try to improve what we can do. One of the key things, for instance, that we're doing at the moment is doing a serious review of the kits and the forms on the spousal application form, because currently they're cumbersome. And I think we would all acknowledge that. So we're trying to come up with ways to simplify that. We can't do everything all at once, but we're starting with the spouses. We're starting also with the temporary resident applications. So there are these sorts of things which we are continually doing to try to improve it. The Minister mentioned the website as well. That's another mechanism. We did do a major review, and we was brought up to date a couple of years ago, but now it needs to be done yet again. And so there's constantly a series of things that we're doing. We do have a client service strategy, which outlines the various things that we are going to be doing in the next few months, few years, and so on. So there are a number of measures there to manage our our interrelationship with the clients and to ensure that we're ever improving.
Okay, thank you. You've mentioned that the service standards for your key lines are published. Is that something you could just share with the clerk so that we could just sort of get access to that in the future?
Absolutely.
I'd be grateful. In terms of your client survey, is that offered just in English and French or other languages?
I don't know the answer to that offhand. I don't know if Mr. Armstrong knows. I believe it's just English and French only, but I do not know. We could confirm that through the clerk.
I'd be grateful, and just maybe even a little information around, is it just randomly given out in your different key lines, or do you have any more information on that?
No, the survey is done independently, but we could again give you the methodology for that survey. We could share that with you.
Okay. And then feedback from call centers. So if people had concern about call centers or the length of time or the service that they've provided, how is it that someone would actually provide feedback? Is that easy? How does one access the feedback loop?
So that is provided through the client feedback mechanism. So there's a way that all our clients can provide feedback, whether positive or negative, and that's reviewed centrally, and then we look to adjust our procedures and our training sometimes.
So in terms of, so it's online, or how is it that someone actually gives that feedback? It's through just online?
Yes, they can do that online.
Okay. And is the client service strategy also a public document?
No, it's not a public document. It's an internal document, but it's used very seriously within the department.
Okay.
20 seconds.
Okay. Errors. It seems like when there is an application that goes in and there's one error, we seem to find that the whole application is absolutely rejected. Why is that the case?
I don't think it generally is the case. We try to use some common sense on things. Obviously, we want a complete application. It's simpler for the client. We can provide better service. We can deal with the application more rapidly and so on.
Thank you, Mr. Orr.
Thanks very much.
Mr. Soroya, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister mentioned earlier today we are in competition with Australia, New Zealand, United States, among other countries. Website is the issue. Who's winning the war? Who's taking the best of the best immigrants? Where are we stand at number 1, number 2, number 3?
Mr. Chair, I think that's a very difficult question to answer, in that it often is apples and oranges, because the criteria for different countries is used in such a different way. And I think what you would really need to look at is the outcomes of immigrants in the various countries to be able to really establish what's more effective in certain countries than others. But to be sure, we work closely with our Five Nation colleagues to monitor what's going on, to ensure we're sort of on the same wavelength, but we also recognize we're in a friendly competition with them as well. But I don't think it's possible probably to answer who's coming out on top.
Are we satisfied that our portion of the people we're getting in, are we totally satisfied we are getting a fair share?
I think that's fair to say. I think it's also important to note that various countries will copy what another country is doing, and that certainly other countries have copied what Canada has done and continues to do at this moment. There's a lot of interest in what we're doing at the moment in various areas, and I think that signals that Canada is certainly well within the league and doing well.
Fantastic. Something different from the different angle. In 2014, caps were introduced for the intake of applications for family class sponsorship and parents and grandparents. What was the purpose of these caps limiting the intake of parents and grandparents?
I think I would take you back to 2011 and prior to that date, because at that point there was not a cap on the number of parents and grandparents, and there were limited space within the levels. We were not able to deal with those applicants, and we built up a backlog of about 168,000 applications, which is not good news for anyone who are going to be waiting for that long and no indication at that point. So at that point there was a pause on applications for some 26 months from November 5th, 2011 until the 1st of January 2014. And at that point, it was reopened for parents and grandparents, but with a cap so that we were able to control the numbers and not build up a backlog again.
Are these applications being processed in a priority manner as they are new?
They are dealt with largely on a chronological basis, so on the first in, first out, but it's what we will do is when we contact the applicants, we will be contacting them on the date that we receive the application. And so, yes, we do try to respect that, the date that they applied.
What the effects this cap has had on the overall goals of reuniting the families?
Well, I think what we are seeing is that the processing times are coming down, and we expect that they will come down quite significantly over the next year as we work largely through that pre-2011 backlog. Obviously, if you're dealing with cases from that date, the processing time seems extremely long, which is why it's at about 73 months at the moment. Once we get to the new cohort coming in from 2014, it will start, the processing times, the average processing times will be far more palatable.
What is the backlog today? Would you have any number in mind?
The backlog at the moment, it was at 165K and has come down to about 58,000.
What is the time processing for these applications at this moment?
Well, the average processing time at the moment still appears to be 73 months, but we are starting to deal with cases that were received in 2014, and so for those cases and moving forward, the processing time will be far shorter than that.
Starting in 2011, our IRCC introduced a number of changes to increase the efficiency of the parents and grandparents sponsorship program and decrease the likelihood of future backlog and lengthy wait time. However, there continue to be the backlog. I think you already answered this. What is the current backlog? About this much. What measures have been introduced to address the backlog? It's just basically we're putting more staff on.
Well, I think most importantly, there has been more space within the levels and in the target that we deliver on each year. And so that has allowed us to work down the backlog over the last couple of years.
What is the reported level of annual income for the elderly immigrants in the category of parents and grandparents in comparison to all other categories? Is it higher or lower, highest or the lowest?
When we evaluate a sponsorship, we are looking at the sponsor's income, and they must meet a minimum cutoff, which is established by Statistics Canada, which looks at the number of people in the household and what is required to meet the basic needs of that family group.
What is the level of incidence for the use of old age supplement and guaranteed income supplement allowance for the parents and grandparents, again, in comparison to all other categories?
I do not have that information with me, sir.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Kwan, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On checking the website on the application processing time, so specifically with parents and grandparents, it currently says working on applications received in January 2014, and there's no further information provided. I wonder, first off, with respect to applications in 2014, does that mean to say those that arrived prior to January 2014 are in process already? They've all been are underway in their processing?
That is correct.
And is it the case that there are different times with the processing of each application is because of the complexity of each application? Is that correct?
Largely,
that's why some could appear to be going faster than others?
That is largely the case. It's also how quickly people respond to our requests for further information.
So currently, right now, I believe the wait times for processing parents and grandparents is 73 months, which is almost 6 years, or 79 months, if I've got it right, which is, over 6 years, which is a long time. So in that regard, does that include the application processing time from the embassy office overseas? Does that include that period, or is it just from the processing center from the Mississauga processing center?
No, that processing time would be from the date of sponsorship until the date that a final decision is made, wherever that might be.
Wherever that might be, okay. And there's been situations where a person mixes a submission and mix it within the quota. Formerly it was 5,000 and now it's 10,000, but the applications returned to them because there was, some piece of document was incorrectly filled out or signature was missing somewhere, some inadvertent mistake that a person's made. The previous practice is such that those applications are taken out of the process, and even though they made it within the quota limitations. Is that still the practice today?
Practice is that we only accept fully complete applications within the cap.
Okay, when the person inadvertently makes a mistake and you take the application out because they've missed some form, because these forms are complicated to fill out, even though I know people hire very expensive consultants, still sometimes they miss things. Is there any consideration from the ministry to actually send that information or to request that information from the applicant so that we can have the complete information, especially when it's just some minor piece of information that's been missing? Because one would have to, I think, on a normal, reasonable sense, that is unfair, especially when it's a quota system and you're taken out of the quota system because you missed some line somewhere in the provision of information.
So, Mr. Chair, when we're looking at the parents and grandparents, and when the cap opens at the beginning of January, what happens is we receive tens of thousands of applications within the very first few days. And so that the office in Mississauga has to very quickly do a completeness check on within a few days, it could be as many as 16,000 applications that are received. So certainly the applicants will want to know very, very quickly if they're within the cap or not. And so that when the department reviews it, it's only the cases that are completed that are entered into the cap. So the applications arrive very, very rapidly, and there's the expectation that a decision on completeness and on the cap counting will be done very, very quickly, so that the department has to look at completed applications.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I'm saying that there is inherent unfairness with respect to that, especially for those who inadvertently miss one small little piece of information. I'll park that for a minute. I'm wondering, the website that's being provided, it does not actually provide the wait times country by country for parents and grandparents. It used to, so that people actually have a sense on how long they might reasonably expect to wait. The average times sometimes is not a reflection of reality because of where you are. Is there any consideration in providing that full information once again so that people actually know how long they can expect to wait?
The reason we no longer present the information country by country is because of the changes in how we process applications. It used to be that all applications went abroad to a mission, and therefore it was very dependent on how long that mission was working. That's no longer the case. What the issue is now is a large number of cases are dealt with in Canada and never are sent to a mission abroad. And thus, it is much more, it depends on the matter of complexity of the file rather than on the nationality of the file. So that saying country of origin really is irrelevant in our processing times.
So are you suggesting that a person from India could be waiting just as long as a person who's making an application from China, because the country of origin is no longer a consideration? because it appears to me that there is actually, at least the constituents that I've come across, there seems to be some significant difference with their wait times depending on their country of origin.
Yeah, by and large, it's a matter of complexity. And so that because a large number of cases from whatever country are completely finalized within Canada.
I wonder, can we get the information then from your office at a later time, listing out the countries of origin in terms of the application and what those wait times are so we can do some comparisons? Maybe there isn't, maybe there really isn't, but the cases that's come across my desk, I got to tell you, there seems to be significant differences, and I would like to see the stats to back that up, if I may. And if that information can be provided to the committee, that would be great. Talked about a little bit about the threshold, the amount of dollars in terms of sponsorship.
10
can you
seconds.
give us a figure specifically, how much?
Those figures are available, but I do not have them with me at the moment.
So perhaps we can add that to the undertakings, the previous undertaking, and undertake to provide this data as well. Mr. Tabara, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the staff for being here, the department. I have two questions, and it relates to individuals that have come into my constituency office. So one is an individual sponsoring his common law partner, and this was in 2007. Just going to describe the situation that happened there. So he applied to the application center in Mississauga in 2007. 23 days later, he was notified and qualified as a sponsor for his partner's application. And then it was forwarded to the Beijing visa office. Then a month later, he was notified for an interview and an appointment. He was interviewed in Beijing and issued a permanent resident visa. So altogether, it was a time frame of 3 months. But today, however, IRCC website states that an estimated processing time for sponsoring a spouse or common law partner from China is 13 months. So my question is, what happened to the processing times from 9 years ago, and how can we get back to earlier levels?
Right. Mr. Chair, yes, it's no doubt that there has been an increase in the processing times for spousal applications, and I think the Minister was referring to three main elements to try to bring down those times. First of all, money, which has been given to the Department to try to work on this, level space, which is critically important in this, and also efficiencies. So I think what you are seeing already is change from June 2015 to June 2016 of the processing times overall. I'm not speaking about Beijing particularly, but overall have come down from 18 to 16 months in the overseas context, and from 26 to 22 months in the in-Canada, and we are hoping to bring that down significantly over the coming year.
My second question refers to another constituent of mine. They applied for their parents to be here, and from what they told me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a certain window that it opens up. I believe it early in January. They applied last year for their mother, and I believe they handed it here right early in the morning, right away, hand delivered, or maybe they mailed it the same day anyways, but they were uneligible for their parent to stay, and their parent is on a super visa. So I informed them to reapply again for 2017, the day it opens up. Is there any reassurances for this individual that if they submit their documents for their parent sponsorships, that they can be eligible? I know it's being extended from 5,000 to 10,000 in 2017, but do you have any suggestions of why there's this process? And I heard that when they do apply right away, that the cap is over within a couple hours.
I mean, more or less that is the case. When the cap was opened at the beginning of January this year, I believe it'll be January 3rd of 2017, and there's no doubt that the demand for spaces is far greater than the 10,000. And so, yes, there is a large number of applications that we receive at that time. I think Mr. Armstrong just spoke of about 16,000 for 10,000 places. And so, yes, unfortunately, there's some people who are not able to get into that cap, even though their application is complete, even though it's there right on time. It's just a matter of first come, first serve. We try to do it in as fair and transparent a way as possible, but inevitably there are some people who are going to be disappointed simply because of the numbers. I don't know if you would like to add anything, Mr. Armstrong.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, the department is examining options to see how we can better deal with this great intake in a very, very short period of time. But we do apply the first in, first out principle. So literally, we're counting the applications as they come in. So this is part of our challenge, is to try to find a more effective way to do that. But the fact will remain that there is a limited number of spaces, so 10,000 in the cap for parents and grandparents.
So what would your suggestion be then? And I'm not familiar with this process, but do you, is it better to submit it in right when it, just say it opens up at 9 a.m. that day, is it better to submit it electronically, hand delivered, purely? What's the best efficient way?
Yes, well, this is exactly what we are trying to figure out at the moment. What is the fairest way to present the document so everyone is on a similar playing field as well, and we're not favoring one group over another? We certainly can't do hand deliveries because obviously that's going to favor people who live in Mississauga. So that doesn't work. What we have to do, though, is try to find the best way to do it. What we have been doing is it's by courier. Everyone has to send it by courier to arrive on that date. And it's not a great system, but it's worked for the last couple of years. But we are trying to explore if there is a better way which might be more fair and efficient for everyone.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tabar. Mr. Tilson, 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Orr or others, the government budgeted $25 million for the processing time reductions this year and $50 million in each of the next succeeding years. At least that's what I understand, for the next 3 years. Can you tell us what the results are thus far?
Mr. Chair, I think from the $25 million, what you're seeing is a large amount of the money has been put straight into the processing network, both in terms of the international network and the centralized network which Mr. Armstrong runs. That has allowed us to bring down the inventory of applications quite considerably already on the In Canada side. I think the Minister provided some figures on that. It was at 33,000 and it's come down quite considerably already. And we're also seeing a reduction in the processing times. As I mentioned, the In Canada applications have gone from 26 months a year ago to 22 months now. So I think we are seeing very tangible results from the investment of that money.
And that's what I'm asking, whether you can give us the latest numbers for year-over-year comparisons.
Certainly, that will be available. We can make that information available, the specifics of that.
Thank you. You'll give that to the clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you. The previous government brought in the 10-year super visa for parents and grandparents. Could you give us an update on how that program's been working?
Thus far, I think it has been, as the Minister indicated, I think it's been an important contribution given the stress on the parents and grandparents numbers, and so that people who previously may not have been able to come because they would not fit into the cap are able to join their families for extended periods. So it's available for a 2-year, it's a 10-year visa, but you can come in for initial entry of 2 years as opposed to the normal 6 months. It is then is possible to extend the super visa beyond that as well. As I think I gave the numbers earlier, about 70,000 have been issued with an 80% approval rate, and we understand that about of those super visa holders, about 4,200 have applications for permanent residence in progress. And so I think it seems thus far to be a program which is working well and with limited concerns for the social welfare system and so on.
Have there been any issues that have risen as a result of the implementation of this program that you can share with the committee?
We're not aware of any issues, really. I think there's some anecdotal evidence of people with insufficient health insurance, but that's rare, very rare. I think overwhelmingly we have not found any systemic issues with the program.
Has there been a failure rate?
Not that we are aware of.
What changes overall in processing times have occurred over the last 12 months in the family class category?
Well, in terms of the spousal applications, for the overseas, it has gone down from 18 to 16 months processing average. And in Canada, it's gone from 26 months to 22 months. I think it's also worth noting that those people in Canada are eligible for an open work permit, and the take-up on the open work permit has been very high indeed. I think we've also talked about some of the statistics on the parents and grandparents, where the inventory has come down considerably. The processing time still looks very high because of you've got some very old cases being mixed in with the newer ones, but we expect the overall processing time to drop dramatically in the next year.
Are there particular countries that that pose difficulties?
We watch the refusal rates and so on of certain countries. I think it varies in terms of which program, but in terms of the spousal program for the overseas part of it, the highest refusal rate would be for Vietnam. It's then Nigeria, Haiti, and China would be in the top 5.
What's the state of the caregiver class given the large reduction of this year's level plans?
Well, in fact, I believe it's just over 20,000 living caregivers this year, which is a significant number and has allowed us to bring down the number of the inventory considerably. The inventory is still significant in that program, but it is coming down dramatically over the last few years.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. Ms. Zaid, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the officials for coming in today. When discussing the levels before the committee on June 9th, Mr. David Menicon said the processing time backlog for caregivers and family members was at 48 months and was expected to drop rapidly over the next year or two. So where does the backlog stand today for that class specifically?
For living care. Backlog on August 2016 was 12,188 cases, or 33,866 persons. One of the things we are noticing, in fact, with the live-in caregiver program is that as we are processing cases, more dependents are becoming part of them. So while the number of cases we're dealing with is coming down, the actual number of people we're dealing with within that program, because of the dependents, is actually going up a little bit. But nevertheless, we are still bringing the inventory down. So
has it reduced then as compared to 48 months, the average time?
Not dramatically since June. No, it's not come down significantly at this stage.
So it is still at about 48 months, or?
I believe it's still around that figure. I don't have the precise figure with me.
Could you provide the backlog for spousal class and family reunification class year by year, going back to 10 years? Would that be possible? If you don't have it now, you can submit it through the chair to the committee.
Yes, I think it might be easier to submit it to the chair, to the clerk.
And would it be possible to have have it for different processing centers or country by country? Because I know, like dealing with the casework at my constituency office, there are certain countries where the processing time is higher for spousal For a few countries, it is up to 36 months, I have seen in some cases.
There's no question that that is the case, and yes, we can provide some of that information. As I've said, I think you're going to see more and more of sort of a homogenization of the processing times for various nationalities as we do more and more processing within Canada.
Okay, and one more request. Would it be possible to provide the budget allocations for processing spousal and family reunification class cases for the last 10 years? That also, if it can be provided through the chair to us.
Mr. Chair, I'm not clear. I'm not sure exactly what is available, but we will certainly do our best to provide that information.
Is there like, do you, with your experience, do you think that there is a link between the size of the backlog and the budget allocations to that?
The biggest issue in creating a backlog in the various categories, including family class, has been the level space and greater demand than there was space for us to finalize applications. So I think it's more a question of levels than it is money.
So you think that it is, like, is it the efficiency, or is it lesser resources, or how would you define?
I think in the broad scheme of things, if you look at it, the department, one of its key commitments is to deliver on the levels each year, and we have targets in all the various categories within the levels plan. If you look at the history of the department over the last several years, we've done remarkably well in hitting the appropriate targets, and we are resourced to deliver on those various targets. So,
I'll give you one example. I have seen in some cases the medical has been done 3 times, 4 times, because the medical is done and then it expires when the background checks are happening or the security checks are happening. So that delays also the process. Do you think that is there something
there's no
associated?
doubt that there have been instances where that has occurred, and too frequently. We're making every effort at the moment to try to look at the process from A to Z and try to figure out better ways to manage that so that we avoid that situation occurring.
Thank you. Mr. Tilson, 5 minutes, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was asking questions about the caregiver class. What's the current status of the caregiver class backlog?
Well, Mr. Chair, the number of cases at the moment, as of August 2016, the backlog of permanent resident applications is 12,188 cases, or 33,866 persons. While the backlog in cases has decreased since 2014, the backlog in persons has increased since July 2013 as applicants are including their dependents in their permanent resident applications. Previously, they were tending to sponsor them after they had become permanent residents. So we have the numbers increasing somewhat, even though the number of cases is indeed coming down.
Can you tell us which labor markets have been or will be most adversely affected by the shift away from economic migrants?
I think the Minister made clear that we have not backed away from economic migration. If you look at the figures in 2016, the economic numbers are somewhat lower than they were in 2015, but if you compare to all previous years, it is higher than those years. So it's higher than 2014, 13, 12, etc.
You did a good job. I was hoping you'd give a different answer. Have you noted the labor shortages in any particular markets thus far under this new focus?
I do not have that information. I think it may be better put to ESDC as who are really the custodians of looking at the labor market.
Can you report on the status and functioning of the pilot program to allow applicants under the spouse or common law partner in Canada class to work while awaiting the processing of their inland applications?
We've issued approximately 20,700 spousal open work permits since that was permitted, which I believe started in 2014. Sorry, the end of 2014, December 22nd, 2014. So I think that that has been a valuable component for those who are awaiting finalization of their applications. It has allowed them to work and to become better settled within Canada.
Have there been any problems?
Not that I'm aware of.
And has there been a failure rate?
Again, not that I am aware of.
Can you report on the effect of the 2014 change in the age of dependent children from 22 to 19 who can be sponsored under the family class that has had? The change.
Yes, the age of dependency was to under 19 years of age, so it had an impact on the numbers of people who would be included in the various categories. I'm not aware of other impacts there.
So you can't tell us what the numbers show as a result of this change?
Oh, I'm sorry, I do not have that information with me. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I do not have that information.
Perhaps, Mr. Orr, you could send that to the clerk.
Yes, we'll look into that.
Mr. Chairman, have I got time? I have one more question. Can you report on the changes instituted in 2014 on the income requirements for sponsoring parents and grandparents?
Well, indeed, there were some changes at that time. The period of sponsorship, for instance, went from 10 years to 20, and some of the economic requirements were increased at that point. This was to ensure that the parents and grandparents would not be accessing social assistance.
Thank you. Mr. Sarai, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I wanted to find out, although my colleague asked this question earlier, but in terms of the parent and grandparent sponsorships, they're all received in one day, usually in a few hours the amount is complete. I wanted to find out, do we have a regional breakdown between the provinces and territories of how many parent or grandparent applications come from British Columbia versus Ontario? Do we have a regional breakdown?
I'm sure we could establish that.
My point is, I'm just worried about procedural fairness. The courier process, naturally a courier that's in Mississauga will be able to deliver it, boom, right 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever the time you start, and somebody from British Columbia might not have that same efficiency. Would there be a possibility to do it, to look at other options, such as they all have to come in on one day, but then do a lottery out of the, say you had 16,000 and you have 10,000, so that there's no strategical advantage to my colleagues on the left of me versus those that are from the west. So I'd ask if you can look into that. I'm not saying it happens, I don't know, and I'm just hoping that the bias doesn't happen just because of the proximity.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think we're not aware of any regional disparity, and we're certainly very conscious of ensuring fairness and transparency as we do this. As I mentioned, we are trying to look at if there are better ways to do this, and if there are possibilities to look at things. We certainly welcome ideas on how we could do this.
My second thing is, we in our briefing, we have numbers for overall wait times for all the different classes, but they seem to go from 2002 to 2012. Is there data from 2013 to 2015? And if so, can you get the clerk?
That should be available, and yes, we can supply that to the clerk.
And What is your targeted wait times on that same notion for spouses, children, and parents, siblings going forward with all the new funding, new hires? Is there a targeted number that it's an internal number or an external number that we can anticipate wait times for spousal sponsorships, parental sponsorships as well? Because our constituents will be naturally asking that.
No, and it's well understood, and we will try to provide that. I don't think I'm in a position to do that right now. We are in a phase of trying to revamp, particularly the spousal program, to find efficiencies, to find better ways to deal with it, to find, as I said, revamping our forms, our kits to make them clearer, and these sorts of things as well. Once we are in a position to do that and to come up with something, we'll come up with an appropriate service standard as well, which reflects the reality and ensure that we are able to deliver on it. We want to be very ambitious, though, in this area.
My last thing, I wish I could have asked it to the minister, but perhaps to yourself. The Super Visa works in a great way in terms of getting parents and grandparents here, those that are waiting. One of the problems I've noticed is parents and grandparents that come, parents specifically in their 50s or early 50s to late 50s, maybe early 60s, they find it a burden when they're staying with their children. Their children have to pay for their private medical bills. They're not allowed to work. But they're anticipating staying up to 2 years. Is there a possibility that the department could look into perhaps allowing them to work a part-time basis similar to students, where a 20-hour week, where they can, just so that they're not a burden on their parents, but they're not taking high-paid jobs away from others, but a buffer situation similar to what students would do, where they work 10 to 20 hours a week while continuing with their studies. Is that something that has been explored, or could it be explored, if I may ask?
I'm not aware, Mr. Chair, that has been explored. It certainly was not in the intent of the Super Visa, the way it was set up. Certainly, we're open to looking at other possibilities.
Thank you. Ms. Kwan, 3 minutes.
I wonder if I could also, or the committee could also, get the information that Ms. Zai had asked for the spousal sponsorship, but to apply that for the parents, grandparents application as well. And then on the question around misinformation or missing information in terms of that application process, there's been situations that's been brought to my attention whereby the application was sent back to someone, rejected, to say that something was missing, but actually the information was provided and it was missed by the official who was processing it. But then they got thrown out of the quota system because the application was rejected. And so that's, of course, is of grave concern because people have nowhere to sort of to appeal that situation. So I'm wondering, again, in terms of the ministry in processing this, what kind of assurances then can we have for those who've actually worked really hard to get the application in and is rejected, even by error, that's been made by the ministry officials? How can that be addressed?
Well, that is very much of concern to us as well. I'll turn to Mr. Armstrong.
So in a case like that, the applicant can apply for reconsideration, and speaking without, talking about a specific case, if there was an error made by officials, then the matter would be corrected.
So how would you be able to prove that?
Well, the individual would write to us, and that's not an unusual occurrence, that if somebody has a matter which requires reconsideration, then they request reconsideration.
How often does that happen?
I don't think we have, I couldn't provide you with statistics for how often that happens, but that does occur.
Do people know that they can actually make such an appeal? Because I'm not sure if people do.
I don't think, I wouldn't call it an appeal. It's called reconsideration, and many people are represented either by authorized representative or by lawyers and they're certainly aware of that process. And I'm not just speaking about family class.
In terms of the spousal application, is it the case also in the processing time of the spousal application that I believe, well, this goes
10
country
seconds.
by country, the ones that had applied prior to the time that's listed in the on the website, have all those been processed or in the process of being processed through?
A very quick response.
They would be in process. Now, there are some cases which do take a considerable length of time, and that's always the case. So I can't say they'd all been finalized, but they would all be in process.
I'd like to thank the department officials for appearing before our committee. At this point, the committee shall adjourn.